Okay. So, thank you all very much for joining us. I want to tell you a little bit about Los Angeles Birders. We were formed to encourage, educate, and empower birders, and we decided we do this by using several means. We obviously, and what you're all here for tonight is I can't even speak tonight. Sorry about that. We have webinars. We've been putting on webinars for over 2 years now, and we have about 50 webinars that have been recorded and are on our website. All those recordings are available to you, in fact, to everyone. Anyone that goes to our website can take a look at the recordings. So if you miss a recording, if you miss a webinar, or you want to go back and re-see part of a webinar, it's there for you to take advantage of. Second way is we have beginning birding classes. We have now presented 3 beginning birding 101 classes, and we have educated through those classes about 30 to 35 people. So they're very popular, and we keep the number low. And also, it's been the pandemic years, coming out of the pandemic, so they're there, and we really enjoy doing it. We have we excuse me we empower birders and educate and encourage birders by having an active community science program. We've had 3 community science programs so far. We started off with our Bell Sagebrush Sparrow survey, moved on to our Bird Atlas trial, and we had recently had our Swainson's Hawk survey in LA County. We have the Bird Atlas coming up in the near future. I hope all of you participate in that one way or the other. And we're talking about a shorebird survey and things like that. So it's very, very exciting. We're looking forward to it. And we can always use help in all our programs, let alone the community science programs. We do these things also by helping to shape future birding, the future of birding. We now have over 30 Lab S or lab students actively in our Lab S section of lab. And in fact, they were out today looking at condors. Lucky little guys. So that's really exciting. They have their own newsletter, they have their own field trips, and they have their own webinars, as well as participating in lab webinars and field trips, etc. So it's very exciting. And of course, we go birding. We are kind of a field ornithologist. In fact, we are very much a field ornithologist type organization. So we like running specialty trips such as North Slope or Pelagics. We try to handle our trips with a purpose, but the bottom line is we always like to go out and have fun. We've also started recently on having a more monthly trips. So we are now going to the Huntington Gardens. You don't have to be a member of Huntington. You just have to be a member of a lab. And we've run 2 of them so far, and it's a great thing. But we do have signups. The Huntington does limit how many people we can take along. So watch and lab members can join us on that trip. Lab, as you may know, is a membership-based nonprofit all-volunteer organization. We need membership to be involved and to help guide us in what we do. For example, to this end, we sent out a membership survey last year, you may recall, and that has helped us in kind of shaping our direction that we've gone so far. So if you have any comments or questions, now is kind of a good time to ask them. If something comes up in the future, you can always shoot us an email either through the contact portion on our website, or if you know anyone, any board members, just shoot us a personal email. That's fine. Another way of helping to guide lab is by voting for our officers. We have 4 officers in the lab: president, vice president, treasurer, and secretary. and they alternate. It's a 2-year term, and everyone does 2 years on alternate basis. This year, we are holding the elections for our vice president and treasurer. And currently, our current vice president and treasurer, Frank Gilliland and Eileen Burton, uh, are re-upping to run. We asked membership for any other nominations, and we did not receive any, but we did receive a lot of questions, so we appreciate that. But we didn't receive any, so these are uncontested elections. And so we basically need you to give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down on our elections. And we do need you to vote. We are a membership organization, and we require at least a third of our members, of our voting members, to actually vote in our elections. So let's talk about the elections. The elections will be starting tonight, and they run for 1 week. You, as a lab member, will actually be receiving a ballot via email. And that email will be coming from an organization called Election Buddy. So look for that. If it's not in your inbox, it's probably in your spam. So Election Buddy will be sending out an email. Again, you have 1 week to vote, and there's only 2 positions to vote for, so it's real easy. In case you're not familiar with Frank or Eileen, you can go to our website. And on our website, on the front page, we have an information button. And there's the join review button, donate button, and now we have a board election button. When you click on the board election button, you will get an overview again, but more importantly, you will get the candidate bios for Frank and for Eileen, and kind of familiarize yourself a bit with them. And I think that's about all I have to say. And I see we have a few things in the chat. So let me see here.
Yeah, in the chat, somebody asked about, everybody muted and so on. We are in webinar mode, so other than presenters, everybody is muted and no video. There is the chat that you can use for any comments, for questions, especially for questions about the presentation. There's the Q&A, and please go ahead and use that.
So that's really about all I have to drone on about when it comes to our elections. So please, 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 when Election Buddy sends out that email to you, which should be happening starting at 7:30, I believe, tonight. So you should be receiving it during the meeting. If we joined a few months ago, do we need to re-up or after 12 months? You will be receiving, the question is, Kim asks, if we joined just a few months ago, do we need to re-up now or after 12 months? You can re-up anytime you wish. However, I think about a month before before the expiration, you'll receive an email from Naresh, our membership chair, reminding you that it's about time to re-up. And
yeah, so it's 12 months is the
it's
short
12
answer.
months? Okay.
Is the short answer. You'll get an email a little bit before that.
Yeah. And are there any other questions? Any other answers? If you have any questions, if anything comes up in the future, just pop an email to us either through our website or through any personal emails you may have. We'll be glad to get you right away, get your answer right away.
There's a contact form on the website for that.
Okay. And why don't we, so thank you all. Oh, do we? Oh, and Naresh is here.
Yeah, and Naresh points
Go
out,
ahead.
yes, after 12 months, he will send the renewal reminder.
Exactly. Great. One of the things that you might want to think about is what we're thinking about is automatic renewals, just based on, with a warning email saying your renewal will automatically renew on a certain date, and then putting through there. If you think it's a good idea, let us know. We'd appreciate it. If you don't think it's a good idea, let us know too. Um, we just are looking for things that make it easier for you and for us. By the way, we're trying to be a 21st century birding organization. Everything we're trying to do is on the internet, on the web, and with that, I think,
Except for field trips.
except for field trips, that's yes to auto renew. Yeah, I think that's a great idea too. Thanks. Except for field trips, thank goodness. We actually have to get out and see real people every now and then. And I think we're ready to move on to our featured presenter for tonight. And what I would like to do is introduce Janet Shield. Janet is our secretary for Los Angeles Birders. And actually, do I need to go through any of these things?
If you want to, we usually do go through them, but
Yeah, go back to the beginning, Mark. Let me
okay,
let's see what I
go back to
missed.
the beginning. You
Okay.
said this already. Um,
Okay, David's coming up. You'll find out.
David's coming up.
Okay, next. Next week we'll have Alvaro Jaramillo here, and he'll be talking about New World icterids. Don't miss it. Yeah, another vote for auto renewal. Thanks. And if you, as I mentioned, if you missed a webinar, they're all on our website. So please go to labirders.org and you can find the webinar or portion of a webinar and rewatch it. Next.
And this is the elections.
And we voted. And Los Angeles Birder students, we have, as I mentioned also, we have a very, very active Los Angeles Birder students section. They were out looking at condos today, and boy, are their arms tired. We have actually a few with us tonight, I see, but it's a very, very exciting program, doing their own newsletters, presentations, etc. And they are the future of ornithology. So if you have any or know of any young student birders, send them our way. We can always use more. Next. And your membership does support these live webinars, supports our recorded webinars or websites, our development of local field ornithology projects, etc. So please, please support us and support birding. And where are we at? We are at
the time for David, or I should say, time for Janet to introduce David.
And again, Janet Shield, our secretary for Los Angeles Birders, if you would please introduce our speaker for tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. And my internet is a little flaky, so hopefully I don't freeze in a funny face. All right. So Los Angeles Birders is pleased to host Dr. David Bell tonight. Dave is a lifelong birder who has spent his career in business devoted to improving the environment. Dave grew up birding in the Pasadena area, volunteering at Eaton Canyon Nature Center, and then later at the Museum of Comparative Zoology at Harvard. Since then, Dave's career has focused on engineering and business, but his interest in birds has remained strong. Dave says that years of what he calls intensive birding therapy have helped him partially recover from his undergraduate degree in physics at Harvard, an MBA from Columbia, and a PhD in robotics from the University of Michigan. Starting in 2009, Dave became interested in promoting eBird as a tool for collecting data to help in bird population monitoring and conservation, especially in the tropics. Dave believed that mobile apps could be used to make eBird data more accessible to birders in under-eBirded areas like the neotropics, and thereby encouraging the birding community to enter more and higher quality data in these areas. Dave led or supported the development of apps for birders, including eBird Mobile, Merlin, and BirdsEye, as well as several field guide apps to help fill this gap. Los Angeles Birders is very pleased to have Dave as a valued board member as well. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. David Bell.
All right, thank you, Janet. All right, well, let me share my screen here. There we go. Let's see if this works. And
Yep,
can you guys see
working
that?
fine. Yes.
Looks great.
All right, fantastic. So first of all, I have to start by giving my plug to the good LA Birders gear that's on the website. I'm drinking my coffee out of the coffee mug, and found it quite satisfactory so far. So I'd encourage everybody to go check that out. Okay, so yeah, this is sort of an unabashedly nerdy presentation focusing on some techie things that I like to do to make my birding more enjoyable, and I hope that you know other people in this presentation will find it helpful. It turns out I've been doing this. I just got back about 36 hours ago from a 2-week trip to the area around Rome and saw a bunch of new birds I've never seen before. So I've kind of gone through this process just recently of preparing for a trip and then going on a trip. So a lot of this was fresh in my mind. I guess as much as my mind is fresh, given that it should be like 7 in the morning and I should be just waking up instead of about to go to sleep. But in any case, I am very interested, and I've been very interested for over 10 years now in this issue, in this subject of how do we get people to use eBird, and how do we get people to enter as much data as possible. And I'm a big believer that if you get people to use eBird and rely on eBird, it'll in turn cause people to use eBird. So with that said, I'm gonna dive in. So let's see. So it's, my approach is not the same at all as everybody else's approach. But when I think about, what makes for a good birding trip, whether it's on a Sunday morning going for 2 hours out birding, or if it's going for 2 weeks to Costa Rica, what is it for me that makes a birding trip productive? And the first is I like to have a goal. And, my goal could be all kinds of things. It could be to have fun. It could be to learn something new. It could be to find a rarity, but I like to have a goal when I go out. And sometimes it's just to relax. I find it fun to prepare, just like going on vacation. I think in many ways, preparation is half the fun. And I don't always have time to prepare as much as I'd like, but I do enjoy that. And I'm going to talk a lot about that. And then I think it's important to make it count for science. I think it's important to enter your sightings into eBird and to try to make that data as high quality as you can. When you're traveling to an area you don't know, it's harder to do a good job of that, but nonetheless, I think it can be valuable, particularly if you're going to a place where there aren't a lot of other eBirders. So I'm gonna talk about each of these 3 areas very briefly. What are goals? How do I prepare? And how do I make it, try to make it count for science? So in terms of goals, there's a lot of things that people try. I'm sure this is a very incomplete list. There are many other things that other people want to do when they're out birding, but some of the ones that I hear my friends, and many of them are here on this call, talk about are, to have fun, to relax, to learn and improve, to see some bird you've never seen before for the year, for the month, for the county, for the state, for your life list, whatever. To explore a new area, to find or chase rarities, and to fill eBird coverage gaps, which is one of my personal favorites. For me personally, when I bird, I'm really interested in having fun. I have young kids now, so I get to bird for a few hours a week, and that's really my time to relax. So that's probably top on my list. I also like to focus on learning, and I like to focus on exploring new areas. I like going places where there aren't a lot of other birders covering. So I like to fill eBird coverage gaps too. But limited myself to 3. On my latest trip, for example, there are these 2 pretty similar species. One's a pallid swift and one is a common swift. And it just turned out that I was going to be going to an area where both occurred together. And so the goal that I set for myself was I want to learn to tell these guys apart. And so I spent a lot of time on my trip staring at the sky in the middle of squares where people thought I was crazy, looking at these swifts. So the one on the left is a pallid swift, the one on the right is a common swift, and I concluded that they look almost exactly the same. They're really hard to tell apart, but the sounds were different enough that I think I got the hang of it by the time I left Italy. All right, so I mean, this is kind of the bulk of what I was going to talk about here, but you know, I'm sure that many of the people, probably most of the people on this call, already know everything I'm going to go over, and so maybe none of this will be helpful to people. But you know, my hope is that out of all this, maybe there's 1 or 2 tricks or ideas that will be helpful to you to make your trips more productive and make your preparation for your trips, you know, more productive. So maybe you'll see something that's helpful. And please feel free, by the way, to put a question in the chat as we're going along. I can't see it, so you know, Mark or Ron or Janet, if you guys see somebody, please don't hesitate to interrupt me and ask the question, or we can, you know, use your judgment and we can save it, whatever, you know, it makes sense. And I'm also happy to share you know, the ideas I have or talk more about these things offline after the talk, you know, so feel free to email me. All right, so preparing for a trip. I think the number one thing that you want to think about when you're preparing for a trip, and again, this doesn't really matter whether you're going over the hill to the Antelope Valley to, you know, Paiute Ponds, or if you're going to, you know, Ecuador. I think it's important to have some idea of what kinds of birds to expect where you're going. This is important because you want to know what's rare and what's common, and you want to have some idea of, you know, which are the species you should be prepared to see. Because, you know, first of all, if you see a bird, you don't want to be the guy who makes the eBird reviewers email you and say, hey, I think you said this, but you meant to say this. You also, if you do see something super rare, you want to recognize it so that you know in time to take photos of it and document it before it flies off. So knowing what to expect, I think is number one. And then study the common birds. So, you know, if you're going to an area where you don't know the book, oftentimes, you know, say Ecuador or Costa Rica, I mean, the book is this thick, and there's no way, at least for somebody with my brain, to begin to wrap your head around the 1,000 species in the area that you're going to in Ecuador or whatever. But, you know, you can focus on the 75 common species, and those will be the first birds you hear when you get off the plane, and those will be the birds that are, you know, making noise in the morning when you wake up. And, you know, again, the same thing applies to Paiute Ponds. I think that's a really, really helpful starting point, because if you know those birds, then you can start recognizing when you encounter something that isn't one of those. And then the third thing is, you know, if you have a goal to, you know, see certain kinds of species or study certain kinds of species, then you might want to think about what are some very specific places to go to be able to see those kinds of things. And it's funny because as I was thinking about that, my daughter, when we went to Italy, she had a very specific bird that she was interested in seeing, because when the last time we went there, she fell in love. So this was her plan for the bird she wanted to see when she went to Italy. So how can we, so why does preparation make birding more fun? Well, you know, I'm sure that people who've been to Central America or South America have had the experience of, you know, getting a great glimpse at a wood creeper that is something like this, and then they open their book and they see this. And in fact, there's probably 2 plates that look pretty much like this. and depending on what country you go to, and there's just, there's, you're in for an hour of flipping through the book and trying to figure out which is on the Pacific slope and which is on the Atlantic slope, and off you go. And you're sitting there looking at a book instead of looking at birds. So, that's for me, a confusion-inducing situation. Now, if you have some idea of the status and distribution of these birds, there's probably one or two that are much more common than the others in the area that you're looking at. And because of the way bird status and distribution works, usually the ones that look exactly the same are in different areas. So there's one on the Pacific slope and one on the Atlantic slope that look pretty similar. And then there's one in the north and one in the south that look pretty similar, but the ones that look really, really different occur together. So if you can eliminate, 3/4 of the birds based on status and distribution, you're usually down to a very short list of birds that look pretty different from each other, making this problem far, far simpler. So, the same concept applies in birding in California. And so knowing that status and distribution just makes this process, for me at least, much, much less frustrating than, flipping open the book and going, oh my gosh, which is, what I used to do in the 80s and 90s when I went down there. Okay, so how can we figure out what are, the birds to expect? So I'm sure everybody here knows, but eBird is a fantastic tool for answering that kind of question. Now, the one thing I would say is that eBird, I'm not sure why they did this exactly, but they've got these, very attractive, snazzy tools, explore species and explore regions at the top. I personally don't find those that helpful. For me, the real value is in the kind of simpler tools, the explore hotspots, bar charts, species maps at the bottom. So I would just encourage you guys, and just as my first tip here is, I would start with the bar charts. Pick an area, pick a region, and go to the bar charts. I find that these tools at the bottom are really where a lot of the value is for me. So talk about that for a minute. So if you do click on that button that says bar chart, it takes you to a page where you can select a region. Now, a region can be a country, or it can be a state, or whatever that subnational geopolitical entity is, depending on the country you're talking about. But subnational 1, subnational 2, you can pick the area that you're going to and focus in on that. And so, for example, if you're going to Costa Rica, you can focus on Guanacaste or one of the other provinces there. Similarly, in Ecuador, or in my case, where I just got back from Lazio in Italy, and get a pretty good idea of, for that part of the country, what are the birds that are there. I don't use this bottom part related to hotspots as much, but that would be a really good way to approach it if you wanted to go to Paiute Ponds and wanted to know what the birds were there. So when you click on that and you say, okay, I want to see the birds for a given area, you get a page that looks like this. And so this is helpful. You can print this out. One of the things that I find helpful, and again, this is another tip that I hope is helpful to somebody, is that you can print it out and have it on paper. I don't do that. I usually put it into Excel, and I'll explain that in a minute, and print it out in a way that's easier to read. But nonetheless, that works well. You can also have it on your phone. So one of the things that you can do is, if you go to this website on your phone, and then you select the share button at the bottom, you can use the button to add to home screen, and then it creates a little icon, which is basically just a bookmark that takes you to this page. So I find that helpful in areas that I bird a lot, or if I'm going on a trip and I'm in a place that has cell coverage, I'll create that, and that'll be a quick way to go to those bar charts. All right, so now what I like to do is download the data, because if I download the data, I can, put it in a pretty format and make it smaller and make it fit on 3 pages and stuff like that. So at the very, very bottom, there's this button that says download histogram data, or this link, I mean. So if you click on that, it gives you a file, and then you can open that file in Excel and do all sorts of stuff with it. So one of the things, and I touched on this briefly, but bar charts are important because when you're birding in a new area, you're often overloaded by 200 types of birds, and very frequently there's just a small handful of them in each group that are common, and so those are the places to start and just makes your life easier. Also, it allows you to avoid the embarrassment of either seeing a rare bird and then not getting a photo of it because you didn't know it was rare, or and then having to say, well, I don't know, or erroneously reporting a rare bird and then making the eBird reviewer go through the work of telling you to fix your checklist. Go down to the bottom and download this histogram data. All right, so when you do that, you get a file that looks like this if you open in Excel, and what you can do then is process it and clean it up and get rid of the extra rows and all of that. So what I like to do is, if I'm going to, well, for example, so I downloaded this when I went to Rome, and Rome is in the region of Lazio in Italy. And so I downloaded the bar chart for this data for Lazio, and I was there in June. So I took an average of the weeks in June. And so I can take all this and I can come up with a single number that's like, okay, here's the relative abundance of all these birds in June. What you can do then is take that information and create a checklist. Now, this is a different one for a trip that I made to Costa Rica a few years ago, but nonetheless, you can take all that kind of not very attractive information and put it into a single column here. And what I've done is, you can just immediately see that some of these birds are much more frequently detected than others. So, turkey vultures and black vultures are seen a lot, 26%. And there's other birds like marbled wood quail that are only seen 2% of the time. So you get a sense for, what am I going to see all the time, turkey vultures, and what am I going to see only rarely if I'm lucky, the black-breasted wood quail. So this is a good way to kind of get that information, in a more streamlined fashion that allows me to then create a checklist, which I can print out, put in my backpack, or fold up and put in my pocket, and I've got all the stats and distribution information I need to to go out and go birding. If I need to say, hey, whoa, gosh, which of these 4 things is it? Boom, pull out the piece of paper, and I got the information I need. So yeah, I like boiling it down to this single piece of information because, if you recall in the last one, that information is in the form of a row of numbers that aren't very easy to interpret, and this makes it just a lot easier. All right, so here's the second example. So now in the trip I just did, I went to several different places. So my daughter goes to school in Ireland, so I went to Ireland, and there were a couple of rows related to that. And then I went to several different regions of Italy, and so I had a column for each of those. And then I had a column to say, is this a bird that I really, want to see? And so for a more, multi-location trip, this was a good way for me to, kind of get a feel for the overall sense for, which are birds that I'm going to only get a chance to see in one place and not in other places. And just have all that information in one place. And again, I got rid of all the birds that are super rare, and I fit it all into 2 sheets of paper, and it was easy to carry around. Again, I calculated the average abundance or frequency of observation for June, and that made it easy for each of these to see what it was. And then one thing that's helpful, I find helpful, is that Excel has a function called conditional formatting. And for all of these, if you if you're in Excel and you go to the top and you search in the little bar and say conditional formatting, you can bring you up and tell you how to do that. But, at a glance, you can kind of see which are the common birds because they're green. And again, I find that helpful. All right, so now one thing that a lot of people want to do when they travel is not just know what's the status and distribution of birds, but they also want to know what are the needs, the quote unquote needs that I have for a place. So not just what are the birds that I can see in this location, but what are the birds that I can see in this location that maybe are new to my life list or new to my list for Italy or my list for Costa Rica or whatever it is that I care about. And eBird has a function that does that, and it's called target species. And again, that's in the bottom of that same explore page on the eBird website. But I don't find that helpful because what it does is it leaves out the most common birds. So it's not a complete list of the birds. So I can't really use it for studying on a trip. So what I do instead is I create my own needs list. I do look at the target species list and I use that kind of more in areas that I'm familiar with, like LA County or Oregon or Washington or someplace. But when I'm traveling to a place that I really just don't know as well, like Ecuador or Italy, I don't use that. I kind of make my own. And so let me just describe quickly how I do that. So you can create your own in Excel. So in order to do that, you get the bar chart the way I described before. Now what you need to do is go get your list for whichever list you care about, your worldwide life list or your year list or your Italy list or whatever it is that you want to compare it against. And you can go, so if you go on eBird to your page, so the My eBird tab, there's a spot at the top when it comes up, it says change region. So you click on that and you can search and find a location to go to. So I started typing Costa Rica pops up, you click on that. Now, I swapped, so this shows Panama, but nonetheless, so you can go and see, okay, what are all the birds I've seen in Panama? And it shows you the number of birds you've seen there. So if you click on that, it will give you the list for your region, and it looks like this. So again, you can download this information, and then you get a list of these are all the birds I've seen in Panama. So I'm not going to go into all the details, but you can use Excel functions or you can do it manually to get that information combined with the list that that you've created from the bar chart. So again, this is the list I had for Costa Rica. Here's a list of all the species in this column. There's the abundance of each of them, and then I added these are birds that I've already seen in Costa Rica, or these birds that I've already seen in my lifetime. And so that's useful information. So it's kind of exciting if I'm out birding and I see something I've never seen before or I've never seen in Costa Rica. That's fun. So I added that information on here. And again, this was a card I could print out and carry around in my pocket. Let me just do a quick process check. So Mark, Ron, any questions come through or anything that you want me to stop for?
Nope, I'm not seeing any questions so far.
All right, yeah, because the way my screen is, I can't see the chat.
Yep, no problem. And when there are, I'll let you know. Or a lot of times we just wait till the end because it's easier.
Okay.
But
all right, so continuing on here. So there's a function, and I'll just throw this out there just for the data nerds like me amongst us. There's a function in Excel called XLOOKUP, which is super helpful for taking all the data in this sheet and taking all the data in this sheet and combining them together into a third sheet. So if you have data in one sheet, you want to pull the information, have I seen this species from this other tab? It's very useful for that. So if you spend 5 minutes if you're already moderately skillful in Excel and you spend 5 minutes on Google, you'll be able to figure out how to use that function. All right, so I will keep going here. Now, about, gosh, at this point, 12 years ago, I was involved in creating an app called BirdsEye, and it's evolved over the years. But a lot of what BirdsEye does was designed to solve these same kinds of problems that we're talking about. And now, obviously, the fact that I go through all this trouble and create these Excel spreadsheets and so on means that, for me at least, BirdsEye doesn't solve the problems quite as well as I would like. And it, it's something that I use in addition to the Excel sorts of spreadsheets that I just talked about. But I'll describe what BirdsEye does, and I tend to use them together, and I find them helpful. So I tend to use BirdsEye more in real time when I'm there for, figuring out, well, where can I see this particular species, or where has such and such been seen recently, or what are rarities that are nearby, or, hey, I want to see a bar chart in a place that's different than where I've printed out already. I use it for more of that kind of real time, queries of data from eBird. And I use the Excel spreadsheet for more kind of, what's the overall big picture. So in BirdsEye, and I'm not gonna go through all the details of BirdsEye. I think BirdsEye is relatively self-explanatory to understand if you spend 30 minutes playing with it, but there are some features that maybe aren't immediately obvious, and so I'm going to point out some of those so that hopefully they will be helpful if you travel. But one of the things you can do in BirdsEye is you can create what's called a favorite location, and they're shown with these little yellow stars. So, for example, when I went to Costa Rica, I was going to stay in a place called Quepos, and Quepos, so I created a favorite location there so that before I went to Costa Rica, I could kind of keep going through the list and getting to know what are the common birds that would be there, during the time of my visit. And so I'll describe quickly how to set up a favorite location. So first of all, you navigate to the area you're looking for, you find where you want to go, you click on it, and that brings up a bar chart in in BirdsEye of what are the birds in that location. You can fiddle around with this filter button at the bottom to which is in the lower right there, to change the radius, because it defaults to just what's at the location that you selected, but oftentimes you want a bigger window, because the more you expand that window out, the more data you have, and sometimes the better data you have. You also might want to specify the time frame. So, for example, if it's January and I'm starting to think about a trip that I'm going to make in April, I would set the time frame to April. So it's showing me the birds that are there in April. So maybe the birds that wintered in South America and will be migrating through Costa Rica in April, it'll show me those birds, in addition to all the birds that are residents there. So, and if you tap on this little empty star at the top of the checklist, it'll turn that location into a favorited location. So these three screens show an example. This is near Quepos, but of what increasing the distance does. Now, Manuel Antonio National Park is a place that already has a lot of data, but still, as you expand the range out, and you can see that on the left here, this is a 1 mile radius, so basically it's just a park. Then it's 5 mile radius, and that kind of includes the nearby town and a few other lodges and stuff. And then 25 miles, and at that point, you're kind of fairly far afield and even getting up into the foothills. And you get kind of more and more data, and the bar charts get smoother and smoother. However, you're getting more and more data from farther away, and in this case, you even get one species, which is in the highland, which doesn't occur in Manuel Antonio a lot. But I often find myself playing with that to find like where's that sweet spot where I'm getting kind of local data, but I have enough data to make the bar charts useful. So that's a trick that I find helpful. So once I've figured out, okay, these are species that are going to be common there. So obviously, black-bellied whistling duck is a bird you're going to see a lot of there. you know, there's going to, of the tinamoos, clearly the great tinamoo is going to be the most commonly encountered one. So at that point, I would go to eBird or go to the field guide or go to online resources. You know, YouTube actually is great, and start searching for information to just familiarize myself with, you know, those birds so that I recognize them, especially the sounds, before I get there. And I, you know, I'm not diving into it, but of course, field guides are at the top of the list as well. Okay, so you know, some of the things that you can do in eBird or BirdsEye once you're there, once you're on the ground, are you know, okay, so now I'm in Costa Rica, I've got my checklist, I'm ready to go. Now I'm more focused on, okay, well, I want to go find birds, and you know, BirdsEye can help with that. So BirdsEye has it, what are nearby birds, and that's going to look again at some radius. So you know, I might send it, if I'm on foot, I might set it up 5 miles or 1 mile, but if I've got a car and I want to drive, I might set it at 25 or 50 miles. And I can see, oh, you know, there's a species that I really want to see that, you know, that's been seen in this location. So maybe I'll drive over there and look for it. Oh, so sorry, there's 3 tabs at the top. So it says nearby, and that's everything that's been seen within that radius in eBird. March, which was, okay, this is the birds that have been seen in the month that I've told it to focus on. And then needs is, of the birds in March, which ones aren't on my, you know, year list or life list that I've told it to filter against. So, you know, it's pretty helpful for immediately focusing in on where can I find birds that are here now and which aren't, you know, which might be interesting to me because I haven't seen them yet. Okay, so yeah, so the needs list, I just mentioned that. You can also, you know, quickly see where these birds are relative to you. So if on one of these lists, for example, you click on, you know, let's say Bullock's Oriole, there's a little red dot, that means it's been seen recently near you. The red line means this is today. So you click on it and it says, okay, hooded oriole, these are the recent sightings. Blue dot says this is where you are right now, and the red dots are where sightings have been recently. So it gives you some idea. If I want to go look for this particular species, these are places I can go look. And if you click on one of them, then it brings up the list of what are all the other birds that have been seen there. And again, it shows you all the birds in March, and the birds that are needs relative to your list. So, you know, kind of, again, a good way to kind of navigate around, look at a few places and go, okay, maybe this is where I want to go birding today. All right. So there's also a rarity section, so you can see what are rare birds that have been seen nearby. You can set that out to a larger distance, like 250 miles. I use this a fair amount when I'm here in California, but when I'm traveling, I don't use this much, because usually when I'm traveling, I'm not looking for birds that are rare there. Usually I'm looking for the more normal birds there because they're interesting for me. But I find this helpful when I'm birding around here. One just very brief thing that isn't really related to travel per se, but which is, I think, an interesting tip or trick that BirdsEye provides is for Christmas bird counts. It shows a pretty precise location of the edge of the count circle. So, you know, assuming, you know, as long as the center point is correct, the distance is exact. And so, you know, a lot of these Christmas count circles aren't that precise, but if for those of you who are data nerds and interested in, you know, knowing exactly where the line is, that's kind of an interesting feature. Okay, so the third part, I think, of traveling and making that interesting for me and making it productive is taking that information and making sure that the data that I collect goes back into eBird. And so I think that's particularly important, or particularly helpful in situations where I'm birding in a place that doesn't have a lot of eBird coverage. And it turns out that Italy is one such place. You know, obviously a lot of the tropics are like that as well. It just turns out that Italians use another system, so there isn't a lot of eBird data there. So, you know, I tried really hard to keep, you know, every little town I went through, every little park I stopped at, I created a checklist. And so I assume that everybody who wants to already on this call already knows how to collect data on eBird. So I'm going to go through this very quickly, but I hope that some of the ideas here, maybe there's something that will be helpful to somebody. So you start a checklist. I think for those of you who've never used the eBird app, this is what it looks like. One of the things I would say is that there's this record track function. I personally like that. I think that that's helpful. It automatically calculates the distance. You can set the start time. So usually I start my checklist when I arrive at the place that I'm going to be birding. So it automatically starts at the right time. But if I forget or whatever, and I don't start it until 10 minutes later, I can set that back to the, roughly about the time when I arrived, and then I can start the checklist and it'll have the right start time. And then this is what it looks like when it creates a location. And once you're done, or sorry, a track of the places you covered, and usually that's pretty good, but sometimes what happens is you want to edit it at the end of your trip, and that can happen for a couple of different reasons. But eBird wants you to calculate the one-way distance. So if you walk a mile on a path and then you walk back on the path, they want you to record that as 1 mile and not double count it because you're covering the same area. So at least in terms of the distance. So in that case, when I'm done, either I'll turn off the tracker when I get to the end and then walk back with it off, or I'll walk the whole way and then edit the track to go back to just that first part. So I find that it works really well. Sometimes what happens is, I'm sure this has happened to everybody who uses eBird on a regular basis, but you're birding at Bear Divide and you get back to Altadena and then you realize, oh, I haven't turned off the checklist and I've got this 43-mile track in eBird. So you can edit it and take it all the way back to the beginning and just have it represent the area that you were actually birding in. I do that probably more often than I'd like to admit. And then this is one that I had from a couple of days ago in this park in Rome, and I was chasing my kids around, and it was just like spaghetti. So I think that it recorded like 2.5 miles, and it was actually probably like 300 yards. So I had to go in and manually fix that one too. One thing is that if you use eBird, and particularly if you use eBirds in places where you're traveling and you don't necessarily know the birds really well, I think this is one of the best things about eBird Mobile is that if I'm entering the birds as I'm going along, it's telling me, hey, this is a rare thing, you need to pay attention. And that I really appreciate. I like knowing that right then. I mean, hopefully I would have already known that from having studied the area before I went there, but oftentimes I don't. And so it turns out that if you're entering this in real time, what happens is something pops up and says, hey, this is a rarity in this location. And I find that really helpful because then that tells me either, uh-oh, you better be sure you know what you're looking at. So, stop, take an extra photo, pay attention. Or it could tell you that the count is too high, not too high, but it's high enough that it's unusual. And so you really want to make sure that you've got the count right. And I find that really helpful because I think that tells me, hey, stop and pay attention and make sure that you know what you're looking at. And if it's rare, hey, this is, take a photo before it flies off. I did have one situation that, kind of back when I was just starting with eBird Mobile, that was just kind of instructive to me in this regard, which was I was birding in San Francisco County, which I don't bird in very much, and I don't know it very well. And I saw a pair of cinnamon teal, and I put it in eBird Mobile, and bing, it popped up, rare. And I thought that can't be right, because cinnamon teal are common, I would say, probably, or at least regular in every single county surrounding San Francisco County. But it turns out I didn't know they are actually very rare that there. And it turns out that those were the only cinnamon teals seen that year, or so, as of that date that year in San Francisco. So all the local birders went crazy trying to see these things for their year list. I would have had no idea. I wouldn't have recognized it was rare. I wouldn't have taken a photo, and everybody would have said, just a couple of blue-winged teal misidentified from some traveling birder. But the fact that it popped up in eBird Mobile told me, oh no, I got to take a photo and I got to make sure I document it. And because I did, it turned out that a bunch of birders got to see these birds that they were excited about. So that was, I was the only one who didn't care because they were common where I was. So I find that kind of thing helpful. And when they're rare, you obviously want to enter comments. You can also enter, photos are great if you can do it, but you can you enter bad comments. And this is an example of a bad comment. I've been birding since I was 8, and I've been counting since I was 4. I know how many blackbirds I saw, so obviously something completely useless. So you want to enter information because the person reviewing your data doesn't know who you are, doesn't care who you are, and just wants information that will be useful to future scientists to document that this sighting was what you said it was, and the number was what you said it was, or at least it was a reasonable estimate. So, try to put something that will be helpful to those folks. All right, eBird Mobile is just starting to add a whole bunch of new features, which are based on features which are on the website that allow you to explore locations. I personally haven't found them that useful, or maybe I just haven't gotten used to using them yet, because I feel like the information that they provide is too slow. It takes too long to load, and it isn't quite what I'm looking for. Like, they've got bar charts, but they don't have needs, and I can't click into things to see where they are. So I end up using BirdsEye for this kind of stuff. But I think that within the next couple years, they'll probably get this to the point where it's really, really awesome. At least I hope so. So, but for right now, I don't use these features that much. And I don't know, Mark, if you have a different experience, or Janet, but that's been my experience with that so far. All right, well, that was really it. It's 8:01. I see I barely made it under the wire here, or not quite, but I'm happy to field questions or talk about anything that people want to talk about related to preparing for birding travel.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that, actually. And David, you kind of raised an interesting point. Just spending time with the birds that you're going to be seeing somewhere that is not common for you, really, or at least for me, my experience is spending time with birds that I don't know is very, very helpful. The first time I went down to Ecuador, I had no idea, but just going through study sessions and knowing what to expect is great. And thank you for pointing that out.
And I find, for example, you look at the warblers in Europe, and it's, it'll make your head explode, right? And but in the places that I was traveling, I looked at the bar charts, and there were like 4 that were common, and one was a blackcap, and it was super obvious, and one was a white-throat, and it was super obvious, and one was a Sardinian warbler, and it was super obvious, and the other one was a Stedes warbler, which looked exactly like 800 other species, but I didn't care because it was the only one that was super abundant, and I learned the calls, right? And that just made my birding. I would have spent endless hours in coffee shops looking at my bird book trying to figure out what Stedes warblers were. So,
Yep.
But yeah, I think that's how birds are. The ones that look similar tend to not live in the same places.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic, and
Yeah.
and I liked what you mentioned about the eBird tracks. I think my record eBird track was 3,000 something miles, where I got on the plane and then I realized after I flew that you look at the track and it goes wiggling and then it goes all the way, yeah,
Back to LA.
back to LA, and then you
Yeah.
have to edit it there.
Hey, David, Yvonne asks, she's kind of curious as to how many species did you actually see in Rome when you were there?
I don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head, but not that many. I mean, the species diversity in European cities isn't that high. I probably saw 25 or 30 species. I mean, in Italy as a whole, I think I saw, probably 50 or something like that. I was, it was a family trip. It wasn't primarily a birding trip. But there were a few interesting ones. There were yellow-legged gulls were probably, for me, one of them, and pallid swifts and lesser kestrels were the most interesting birds that I saw.
Great. So Nancy asked, I want to see a Sardinian warbler. Can they also be seen in Egypt or North Africa?
Oh boy, you tested me.
Like right off the bat, you have to know.
Yeah, that's so easy. I don't know, Mark, could you take that for me?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Sardinian warbler is a common and widespread species. So I don't know off the top of my head, but I would, say go, check out the eBird bar charts, and that's a good one to check out. They're cool birds, really beautiful.
Yeah. And by the way, for those of you who are wondering, I received my email from Election Buddy, went and voted, and received my confirmation back that I have voted. So it's quick and easy. So please go ahead and vote. Anyways, Mark.
Well, I voted too. So
okay.
and so did Naresh. It's really quick and easy. Let's see. And Nancy says Sardinian warbler migrates to Egypt in winter.
Oh, cool.
Okay, great.
Ken comments that it was an interesting presentation, but a lot to digest. The recording will be a valuable study guide. Thanks, Ken, for actually pointing that out, because as I mentioned earlier, all of our webinars are recorded for you to go back to and just go to that one little section that you need to rehear. Like, I'm going to go back and check out the Excel section. Oh, I guess that was most of your presentation, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, but that was interesting though. That was
interesting.
I personally am a believer that it's important to know what's possible, right? If you know what's possible and you decide you want to do it, you can figure out how to do it. But if you don't know that it's possible, then you're never going to think about it.
Right.
So,
exactly. I mean, that goes with birding too. I mean, like when I was a beginning birder, and the first time I ran into someone who just knew all the birds, sounds and everything, I had no idea that was even possible. I said, I want to do that someday.
Exactly.
Ken also asks, what's the source of BirdsEye Data?
It's eBird. We have, we've been associated with eBird for well over a decade now, and so we have access to their public APIs, but we also have access to some kind of old APIs that they still let us use. So we can provide kind of full eBird data in close to real time.
Hey, do me a favor, David, and stop sharing so we so people can get our full. There we go, full images. Okay. I don't know where you were at, Mark.
I was at that was in the Q&A.
Oh, okay.
Let's see.
Okay.
Lance says you should have seen blue rock thrush on the ruins at the forum.
Darn you, Lance. Darn, I did not see blue rock thrush.
Kim says that she has been inspired and has downloaded the mobile eBird
Oh, great.
just based on this. So thank you for that. We have another
Yeah.
mobile eBirder in the wings at the moment.
Yeah, it's so great. I love the mobile eBird app.
Yeah,
I mean, I used
it's
to do
great.
the writing down in notebook thing and then transferring it to eBird later. And
Yep. Yeah.
no, don't
Well,
want to go back to
2010, I worked on I did a big year in California, a not super successful big year, but nonetheless, for me, it was a big year. And it's just, it's impossible for me. You're out birding all day long. You make 20 stops. You stop at all these little, oases out in the middle of the desert.
Yeah.
And for me, entering all that stuff in notebooks, although, there's people who do it that way and it works great for them. And then you come home and you spend 2 hours putting all that stuff into eBird. I mean, for me, I'm lazy. I'm going to end up putting that into one big checklist that's 100 miles long. And, because I don't have 2 hours for that stuff. And then plus, like, I mentioned earlier, you get back and then you realize, oh, guess what? Something I saw was super rare. And now they want a photo and I don't have a photo because I think it was rare at the time. And I thought there's got to be a better way to do this. So I went to Cornell and I said, can you let me build an app to enter data? And they did grudgingly, but they did. And, but it was built for that purpose. Like I want to be done birding when I get home. I don't want to have 2 hours of work to do when I get home.
Yeah, and inevitably you ran out of time. You'd be birding all day, and the last thing you wanted to do was sit down at the computer and
Or you
enter.
look at your notebook and you say,
What
what
the heck
is
did I write?
BLJQ? No, BLJ. Oh, what?
David, did you have anything to do with Merlin?
Yeah, we were the developers who built Merlin. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I have to say that was collaboration with Cornell, and I just in transparency, they did all the hard part, honestly. Because the genius behind Merlin is the artificial intelligence, neural network stuff, and we didn't do that part. That was done by researchers at I think Berkeley, and
Okay.
we did the app part of it.
Right. Right. Interesting.
Mhm.
Yvonne asks if you know, is eBird being used by birders in many countries in Latin America?
So 10 years ago, the answer was an emphatic no. And everything that we just said about what a pain in the tush is to go out and enter 2 hours of sightings when you have been birding all day out in the desert in California, you can multiply by 100 when you talk about going and spending 2 weeks out in the Amazonian, rainforest. And it was just completely irrational to expect that people were going to enter bird sightings in a database when they got home from those kinds of trips. And so, it was really more than anything created to be a better solution to that problem. I mean, for one thing, you come back from 2 weeks, even if you're on a wings trip or something, they might list the location as a state or something, right? And, then some person randomly picks the lat long and you get garbage that way. Whereas if you have your cell phone, you're capturing the actual location where you're standing at the time you turn it on and you get good data. And so it has become by far the dominant repository for these kinds of sightings in Latin America over the last 10 years. And it is now, yeah.
And you say dominant. Another webinar presenter mentioned something about another program.
Yeah, there's a lot, and there are a lot of good ones, and I don't think it's a matter of being in competition with them. So
right.
But
I didn't mean that, of course.
Yeah, but I mean, what we want our data captured somehow, and I assume that over time they'll all kind of get combined together somehow or another. But yeah.
Yeah. So Naresh points out that battery usage is one issue with the mobile app, and what he does is uses airplane mode, and then phone lasts 10 to 12 hours, even if he's using eBird GPS tracks.
And that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what really drains the batteries is kind of being in a place where you have poor cell phone coverage, and we're really working hard to try to stay in touch with the network. Yeah, so that is a great tip. And it's funny because the GPS actually doesn't take that much relative to the network.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting because an old camera I had, the GPS just drained the battery like crazy. So I don't know if that's a specific to phones or they just had it, had the software wrong. Yvonne asks, I heard of a well-known birder starting to use Merlin for his breeding bird survey. How well does it do with deciphering a morning chorus?
I mean, I would say, oh, by the way, one thing I didn't mention was Merlin works shockingly well in Europe and in, Central America and in South America. And so I, should have mentioned that more, but the problem for me is you have to have a photo and you have to get the photo on your phone. And that's where, that's, for me, that's not how birding is. I'd be spending all the time trying to deal with that instead of birding. But it's great. If you have a photo of Merlin, it's great at helping you figure out what it was.
Right. I guess it was the sound app that probably was.
Yeah, I think she might have been referring to the sound app. And
so sorry, I got off track there. But yeah, it works surprisingly well. Now, in terms of a chorus and separating stuff out,
that's
I've
hard.
never tried that. I don't know.
Well, I've tried it.
I've tried it also.
It picks out the loudest. So it picks out the loudest stuff, and then some of the quieter stuff in the background it doesn't even attempt.
Well, I think it might have a lot to do with your phone's ability, because I found with my phone, it might take a while. I was in one spot where I had about a dozen birds singing all over the place, including a mockingbird doing a really good robin, and it nailed the mockingbird doing the robin as well as all the other stuff.
Did it also report a robin?
It did, but there was a robin.
Robin.
So I'm not, and an interesting part also is after it has listed the birds it identified, as that bird calls, it highlights the bird.
Right.
That's calling.
Right.
So
that's nice.
I'm really, really impressed.
But just to repeat a story that I told last week when I was trying out Merlin, and Janet didn't realize I was trying to record. And so Janet said something and I wanted her to be quiet and I said, shh. And then Merlin immediately said, barn owl. So sometimes it gets things wrong.
You're right. That's an old joke.
It is an old joke, but it's a true story.
Oh, okay.
Just 2 weeks ago.
David, I hate to tell you this, but I think we've run out of questions.
All right.
Wait.
Okay, so Anne asked, I was able to download the histogram and then put into an Excel file, but how do I modify more by including the names of the birds and then the percentage of frequencies column?
Yeah, so, I mean, you can take this as far down the Excel rat hole as you care to go, right? But what I would do would be to add a column at the beginning and, add a formula that calculates the average for the period when you plan to be where you're going, or maybe that plus or minus a couple weeks. So if what I'm saying is understandable to you, then great, do that. Otherwise, you need to talk to somebody who's kind of more familiar with Excel and ask them, how can I write a formula that takes an average of, these weeks? And, and I'm happy to, talk about that offline.
Well, 2 more webinars we need are 1, how to organize photos, and 2, how to utilize Excel for birding checklists. Maybe we can wrangle David into that one.
Mark, I'm sure you and I'm guessing probably Lance and Naresh, and I mean, you must do similar stuff, I would think, right?
Yeah, I do similar stuff. Well, especially like when planning big days.
Oh, yeah.
Then I have all kinds of stuff that I do, and
Hmm.
to try to optimize routes and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. I think that's it. Oh, we had another question pop up in the Q&A.
Okay, Roy asked, says several times you mentioned we who have developed the app. Who are the we?
Oh, I'm not a programmer. So I'm the guy who thinks about how I want it to work. And, for example, with eBird Mobile, I was the guy who said, I want to be able to use 4-letter codes and be able to, instead of typing out yellow dash D, all that stuff, I want to be able to write just YB, da, da, da. And I want that to work worldwide. So, for me, I was the guy who kind of designed the functionality, but I work with other people who are part of the company, BirdsEye, who are programmers who then, there's a guy who does the the mobile app, and there's a guy who does the website, and there's a guy who does the server work. And there were people who worked on all the photos, and people worked on the text. So they're a group, and mostly they're bird bums who do that on a part-time basis and spend most of their life, birding in lodges in Ecuador where there's high-speed internet.
So it definitely was a collaborative effort, along with Cornell.
Yeah, right. When the Merlin, that was,
Yeah, even though you did develop BirdsEye on your own, or with before you sent it over to Cornell.
Well, no, we had their permission. It was collaborative with Cornell. I mean, but that was our app. We just did it with their permission.
Okay.
Right, because they have to give us access to the data.
Right.
Similarly with BirdLog, it was called BirdLog, now it's called eBird Mobile. That was us, done with their permission.
Right. Well, thank you for getting that permission. You have made all of our lives much, much better.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
They would have gotten there eventually, but I honestly think it would have taken like 5 years or something. So
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like you said before, it's knowing what's possible, and then seeing it and seeing it done. Then they say, okay, now you know that you can do it, and then everybody wants it.
All right. Exactly. Well, thank you very, very much, David, for presenting for us. We really got a lot out of it, and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it.
All right. Thank you, guys. Yeah, it was fun.
Yep. Thank you.
And next week we have next month. Where are we at? I'm getting the
next month.
Yeah, next month we'll have Alvaro Jaramillo here to talk about icterids. So something not to miss. Please go out and vote. You should have received your email by now. If it's not there, check your spam. And I think that's about it. Thanks again, David. And we'll see everyone next time.
Yep.
Oh.
All right. Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. We'll see.
Bye. Talk to you guys later.
See you later.